Welcome to What Matters, the podcast bringing solar insights to light. In each episode, we explore the real challenges behind why solar projects stall and uncover practical solutions with industry leaders, engineers, and innovators. From performance optimization to site selection and engineering, these expert conversations will enable smarter decisions for a larger impact on the future of solar. This is What Matters, powered by PVcase. Miguel, I'm really excited to have you on the show. Welcome. Before we dive into the survey, I'd love to start with you, Miguel. What drew you to solar specifically out of all the renewable technologies?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here and to speak with you. Yeah, so my journey into solar really started from this desire to do something about climate change back when I was at uni, and really capitalizing on, my I guess pretty unique skills spanning sort of like technical understanding, policy, and business and communications. So I started my career working in a project developer, developing projects in emerging markets, which, as you can imagine, was very fun. And then I moved on to working in climate policy, climate and energy policy within the EU sphere in Brussels. And it was around that time where I was really drawn to solar because of the sheer pace and scalability and versatility of the technology and cost reduction. That was one thing that blew me off, blew my mind really early on. So, the fact that you can install it in rooftops, in deserts, but for agricultural fields, it's just such an amazing technology. And I was working in Solar Power Europe, and I realized that really where the progress was really happening, being driven, was like really on the ground. And then that's what led me to PVcase, this desire to be closer to the ground and to helping develop tools that actually make the energy transition happen faster.
I love that. Yeah, you've been in the intersection of policy and practice, and that's really a perfect setup for today's conversation because this new solar state of solar development report really bridges the same gap from going from the big picture momentum paired with the real world hurdles.
Yeah, no, for sure. Really exciting. Speaking of journeys, I'm curious about yours, Anna. What drew you to solar?
Well, I also started working more broadly in renewables, specifically and also in software for renewables. But then over time, solar kind of drew me in. So I've worked both on the hardware and the software side, and really just solar. I really like how it's sort of tangible it feels. So similar to you, I like that the projects have a really direct and measurable impact, from lowering energy costs, supporting local jobs, delivering reliable, clean energy to communities. So it's just satisfying not only that we're sort of getting to the climate goals, but we're actually moving the dial in a practical way. So I just love the combination of the visibility, the practicality, the real world results, and it's just really kept me excited about solar.
Nice. I guess we're both fans.
Definitely. Okay, so let's tell me a little bit more about the report itself. Why did PVcase decide to launch this survey now?
So, it's really something that we've been thinking about for a while, and I think it really cuts deep into the raison d'être of our company, which was born from listening to engineers working in solar and listening to their pain points and the frictions and the problems that they were having, and establishing a continuous dialogue to try to help that. And 2025 State of Solar project development is really a formalization of that dialogue. I'm actually very happy with the result because we've managed to really move beyond anecdotes and create this sort of very comprehensive and definitive data-driven snapshot of what's happening today and some of the most important solar markets in the world. So what we did was that we surveyed over 400 solar professionals in 4 markets in the US, Germany, Spain, and Italy, across different seniority levels and years of experience in the industry. So really from your very young junior design engineers to seasoned CEOs that have seen it all. And yeah, thanks to that, we really have this very complete and multi-level view of how these different types of solar professionals understand what's going on in the industry right now.
And I think it's really important because until now, most of what we'd have been just anecdotes or fragmented data points. So now we've got over 400 professionals across, as you say, US, Germany, Spain, Italy, and we're really ranging from all sorts of profiles, so GIS managers to CEOs, as you said. And so I think it makes it really valuable because we're not just having one perspective, it's really a complete snapshot of the solar development journey. Yeah.
For sure.
And one of the headline findings was about the project timelines. I think the report shows that 4 out of 5 engineers and developers grew their pipelines last year, and 9 out of 10 expected that growth to continue. So what do you think is driving that confidence?
Yes, I mean, for me, this was really one of the most surprising findings of the entire survey. Because on the one hand, you have this really typically solar, I guess, unshakable confidence, where 84% of the respondents told us their pipeline grew last year. Maybe not so surprising, but really fascinating was to see that across all surveyed markets, 9 out of 10 expected their projects pipelines to continue growing at quite significant levels over the next 2 years. And as I said, this holds true across the board. It doesn't matter if we were asking someone from the US or Spain or junior person or the senior executive. Everyone was universal, was optimistic, sorry. And the drivers to this, they're pretty much, the fundamentals of solar, the fact that it's really well suited to address a lot of the challenges of the energy system. But I think there was also another driver that appeared from the survey related to how the projects were being financed. So as you might be aware, there's a conventional rule of thumb that projects are financed with a 70 to 30 debt to equity ratio, basically meaning that for the majority of your project finance, you rely on debt, usually by banks or other types of investors to get it through, and 30% of your own money. Now, when we aggregated and averaged the responses in the survey, when we asked people how much debt and how much equity do your projects require, it comes out that 55% of the project finance is equity and only 44% is debt. So it's a reversal of the situation. And so I was really surprised by this. It really threw me off because I was very much expecting it to be closer to the 70-30. And I guess possible explanations are just, a result of the very high energy prices of the past few years. And what's good is that this really indicates that developers probably have a lot of liquidity at hand, that they are reinvesting into new projects, which is great for a variety of reasons. But particularly, I think it might mean that our sector is, at least for the moment, insulated from any interest rate anxiety. But, this optimism then, goes head to head with the realities that we are, exposed to every day. All of the headlines talking about growing headwinds and policies going against solar, workflow inefficiencies, and, project failures and permitting and grid connection issues. So it's really interesting to see that we're still so optimistic, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because the report calls it the optimism paradox. And on the one hand, we've got 84% of professionals reporting growth. But then on the other hand, nearly 40% citing that financing, permitting, and interconnection are the main causes for project failure. So it's really a kind of confidence and complexity at the same time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it it really does make you wonder, right? I mean, you've been in this industry far longer than I have, and you've seen and experienced all the ups and downs. So, I guess are we solar people just irredeemable optimists, or what's going on?
I think we are. I mean, we have to be. Solar is really not an industry for the faint of heart. There are the constant hurdles that you've mentioned, from policy changes, financing challenges, grid delays. But, the reasons why I think people, lean towards the optimism is that we've seen again and again how resiliency pays off. So every dip is followed by the surge, the solar coaster. So every time the industry, I think it just matures a little more. So optimism isn't obviously for the, blind of faith. It's just more of a survival skill in solar, I think.
And I guess also born of experience, right? I mean, because we've been through this, we know that times get tough, then they get better. I think what I do hope is that we will get to a point where the peaks and the troughs are going to become smoother because there were some really tough moments in the past, right?
Definitely, definitely. So why don't we dig into the flip side of the optimism? So aside from the market headwinds, what's really holding projects back?
That was really the core question that we wanted to address when we were thinking about of this survey. Basically, trying to understand what are stages represent the biggest hurdles for solar project development. And what we found is that there's a very clear part of the project development process where projects seem to be faltering a lot more. And we call this the pre-construction valley of death. And it's basically point around permitting and financing projects where respondents indicated that project failures were much, much more likely than in the rest of the project development process. And was another part that was very surprising to me because, again, I would have assumed that permitting and grid connection would have been, the top reason for project failure, but it was only second. And the top reason was actually the financing and investment stage, where I think over 40% of respondents indicated that projects failed at that stage. Now, permitting and grids were not far away. They were the second riskiest stage, but it really, it's one of the things that was very interesting about this survey is these seemingly contradictory results. So, in spite of all of the liquidity in the industry and financing projects with equity is it really seems clear that building solid business cases that provide the sufficient confidence not only to convince a bank to give you a loan, but to reach the notice to proceed internally is really the most important struggle that a lot of our colleagues in the industry face. This really leads into another key finding. The survey respondents were pretty much categorical about the really critical role that high quality engineering has for project success. So basically, when you're going to go to wait for years for an interconnection agreement or a permit, there's a temptation to rush your application with preliminary designs just to get your foot in the door quickly. But I think this is really a false economy because projects with sloppy or inaccurate engineering are far more likely to fail, which can lead to these developers and these projects to the back of the line to wait some more or just to be abandoned, right? Even after sometimes significant investments needed. It's a vicious cycle, right?
Totally. I mean, think of it as trying to get a building permit with a rough sketch on a napkin instead of a proper blueprint. So you definitely will not be taken seriously.
It's also part of the history of our industry, right? I mean, it's the that cowboy, solo cowboy mentality. With the optimism comes the risk taking, which I guess has taken us this far. So we cannot just brush it away. But I think with this report, what we also try to do is to advance a couple of best practices so that we think will be useful based on the results of the survey to ensure that more projects navigate this valley of death. And it's basically about front loading engineering due diligence, and instead of doing the bare minimum, to make sure that you strike that right balance of detail and speed, comparing multiple layout scenarios, optimizing the yield to make sure that the project is really de-risked as much as possible before the submissions take place. It's also about tackling data chaos. One finding was that typical solar project involves dozens, so 6 to 12 different software tools and data formats, which really creates a mess full of data silos and informational silos as well that really are the perfect breeding ground for manual errors. So what we find is that what leading firms do is they standardize the project data into a single source of truth that really not only cuts errors but also speeds up the process. And then very much linked to this is a whole part about automation, which was really, really highlighted as a key future trend or need in the industry. And I guess we can talk about that later. But in this area, the best practice really is that we're really convinced that we cannot scale if we need our very limited amount of skilled engineers spending hundreds of hours per project on repetitive tasks when these tasks can be automated, and not only automated but done with a higher degree of control that ultimately improves the project quality. So, I guess to sum this up, it's all about the workflows. And I think the projects that survive the valley of death are the ones that do these best practices that we're putting forward in the report.
Yes, I think the report makes this really clear. As you say, the riskiest stage isn't really the construction. It's all in what we call the pre-construction or the valley of death. And that's really where projects get stuck. It's either with financing falling through, regulations shifting, or like too many stakeholders slowing the process down. So it's really a good reminder that the hardest part of solar is not actually installing the panels, it's actually getting them to the starting line.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also when everyone in the most risky moment, right? So everyone is trying to make sure that there are no unknowns.
And would you say from the report, based on the report, that this looks the same everywhere, or did we see differences between the US, Germany, Spain, and Italy?
So on the Valley of Death, yeah, I think that was really clear. It's basically the same picture everywhere that you look. Financing and permitting and grid connection are the riskiest project stages. But there was also a lot of very interesting national level trends and differences between the surveyed countries. So for example, the US, it's all about, how to navigate the sheer scale of the projects. The projects are so much larger than in the rest of the world. And this creates challenges around navigating a vast and fragmented grid system. And also, there were huge concerns around land acquisition and managing these very, very like massive project portfolios with these fragmented systems, right? I think one other thing that was very interesting about the US, and I guess, a result of the previously in place policies, financing support, is that the USA was the only market where getting projects financed was second to permitting and grid connection as the most risky stage. And then you have Germany, the old veteran of the energy transition. And there it's more about respondents were much more worried about the optimizing the projects better and really how to squeeze every last bit of performance from a very much more land constrained area. So they were, I guess, in a very German way, very focused on precision and engineering. The other market that we surveyed, Spain, I guess, it's quite interesting because the Spanish respondents were probably the most optimistic of the lot, but their optimism really was finding clearly a lot of struggles with bureaucracy. And so permitting processes were by far the biggest complaint in Spain. So there's, this tension between a bullish market sentiment and then the reality of how do you actually make that happen. And then finally, Italy. They shared some of the permitting pain as in Spain, but there was a very clear complaint around the tough situation that they have around the fact that regulations keep changing. So this regulatory instability really makes getting projects on the ground just that much more of a nightmare because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, if reality is going to stay the same or be completely different later on. So yeah, this is an opportunity to plug that we're going to be launching country-specific reports over the coming months. So yeah, for the listeners, they should stay tuned if they want to know what's going on in each market.
Exactly. And just to quickly summarize this for our audience. So what I'm hearing is that, the US, we've got the biggest bottleneck being mostly the grid interconnection, whereas in Germany, the challenges is more on site selection and maybe, getting community acceptance and that quality of the engineering work. And then on the other hand, Spain, it seems like it's more of a tangle of stakeholders that's kind of slowing everything down through all the permitting process. So I think while the pain points look a little different in each market, the core story sort of is the same, that the process is just too fragmented. And so in the end, just too many projects die even before they get a chance to prove their value.
Which is a pity, right? Because it's sunk resources that don't lead to anything, and we don't have any time nor resources to waste in the fight against climate change.
Exactly. So what about looking forward? What do you think the next decade is really about?
This was an area where I guess I kept saying that the results were surprising, and I guess on this front I felt a little bit validated at least once in my opinions, because I honestly think that really the next most important challenge for solar right now is about making it smart and increasing how dispatchable solar electricity can be. And so from the report, you really see these three key trends when we asked in our survey about what are the most important technological innovations that would help more solar projects see the light of day. And one of the most important ones was the integration of battery storage systems. I guess not a surprise, but also how this is adding a lot of complexity to project pipelines. So while BESS is not yet, I guess, or maybe it will never be, but it's not clearly not at the moment the most important part of the solar project developers' workload. Almost everyone pointed out that their company is working on BESS projects. So it's no longer a niche topic. And we see developers really embracing the opportunities of storage really across all the markets. Maybe more worryingly is that seemed to be agreement that engineers, there's still a lack of the right tools for the design of these. It's a completely different beast, right? To a solar projects in which, what you're worried about is shading and grading of the land, optimizing all of that. A battery system, it's a lot more of a financial calculation where you really, really need to also to size the battery correctly, to have a good data on how the electricity market is going to evolve going forward. So I guess, the market really needs to deliver on that type of solution quickly, because we are already in the midst of this boom. The other big technological innovation that people highlighted was not higher efficiency panels or new tracking algorithms, but really, as we were talking about before, it's about the process and how do you improve the process using software and automation to make sure that whatever we have available, the technology that we have now or tomorrow, we can get it on the ground more efficiently. And I guess the third trend that we see that sort of brings it all together is what we're calling unity and intelligence, which is basically this idea that going forward, we really need to be breaking down silos, the data silos, the silos between teams in the project developers, and also embed automation as much as we can in every step of the way, so that the solar professionals can focus on the trickiest questions and don't waste time on, repetitive tasks or things that can be that don't actually need their attention because they can be automated. So, fundamentally it's about building solar not only more, which we definitely need, but building it smarter and more efficiently.
Yeah. I definitely couldn't agree more. I mean, I think for me, what really stands out in the report is the same as you say, just how strongly people are calling for better tools and smarter processes. It's not rocket science, right? And as you say, the message is clear. The future is not just building more solar, it's about building it smarter. So with systems that keep projects actually moving instead of just getting stuck.
For sure. Let's make that happen, Anna.
Definitely. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us today and helping us unpack the very first State of Solar Development report. What stood out to me is that while the optimism in the industry is sky high, the risks still lie in the early stages. So as we talked, financing, permitting, grid connection, and everything that happens before even a single panel goes on the ground. So, the message from the report is really clear. If we want more projects to cross the finish line, we need to work smarter, not just harder.
Exactly. And I guess that will move solar forward.
Definitely. I highly recommend you download the 2025 State of Solar Development Report. It's full of all of these insights and stories and the data from this over 400 professionals across the US and Europe that we just talked about. So please go to pvcase.com/report. That's pvcase.com/report. Miguel, what about if our audience wants to connect with you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. In fact, if anyone wants to know more, wants to have a private conversation about the findings of this report, about the data, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to talk, to be challenged, to hear different points of views. I really love a good debate. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Miguel. Again, great to have you here. Thank you for listening. What Matters is powered by PVcase, the platform trusted by solar professionals around the globe. If you never want to miss out on insights that keep solar projects moving forward, make sure you follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in learning more about streamlining your solar project needs, visit pvcase.com for more info. Until next time.